everyone. I'm Heather. Thank you so much for joining us for another Homeschool Live. Today we'll be hearing from author Brockin, who has written an incredible series of books that homeschoolers will love. Go ahead, share this video in your timeline, and let's get the word out. With so many books out there trying to indoctrinate our children, it is so refreshing to find a series from a biblical perspective. So please let your friends know that this interview is happening, and he is going to be revealing a new book. So you want to make sure to get your friends online and watching this video, and their whole family can look forward to a really good read. And now I'm thrilled to introduce you to Brockin. Alan is the father of a homeschool family. He has 3 children, and he actually began writing the Towers of Light series for his own children as a way to connect with them when he returned home from work. And his goal was to help him illustrate the deep truths of the Bible in an engaging and age-appropriate way, and we're going to hear more about that in a minute. As his children grew, he was active in his church and local homeschool community with multiple volunteer roles in children's ministry and youth development. And now he is sharing his homeschool experience, now that his kids are off to college, through his website, alanbrockenauthor.com. Hi, Alan. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Heather. I am super excited to be here and to share what's going on at Towers of Light.
Well, let's just dive right into it. Can you tell us about Towers of Light, your series?
Yeah, so the Towers of Light series is really a series of books I wrote when my kids were little, as the intro said. And I think one of the things to note is, I'm a dad. I was out working. I was traveling all the time. And I hate to admit this, but one of my big challenges was at the end of the day, you'd want to call home, like you want to connect. But I was just out of words. Like I was spending all day with my customers, doing stuff with them. And sometimes it was really hard at the end of the day to just have that phone call and provide something useful to my kids. On the flip side, I was a morning person. I could wake up early. And so I started having these ideas. And so I jot them down. And then when I got home, over the course of a few days, I'd get home and we'd sit down in the big chair in the living room and I'd tell them a story. Now, my kids were the characters. And so over time, they had their own editorial views as to what the kids should be doing. But I think the other point of it was at the time, I was also reading a lot of like deep theological stuff, A.W. Tozer and other sort of those right. Old C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm. And so one of my challenges was I had these great big ideas, but how do you tell that to a 5-year-old?
Right.
Right. Like, how do you illustrate that? And so that's really where the Towers of Light series, these books came from. The other thing is I grew up in the Midwest. And so I had this whole say American frontier thing going on. Like when I was a kid, we went to the one-room schoolhouse. There was this STEAM fair that we went to every year, a lot of that sort of stuff. So my thought was, what if we had a book that was Little House on the Prairie, but fantastic? You start the slideshow, please.
All right, we'll get those slides up in just a moment. Okay. All right, and the first one, I think it's still trying to load. There we go. All right.
Fantastic. Okay, and so the idea is that these children are growing up in an environment like the American frontier. And so when you think about like homesteading and having to deal with animals and things like that, that's the setting, right? So they've got chores, right? They got to go get the water, that kind of thing. But also there is a darkness coming into the land. And so their father recognizes this and works with the children to build this Tower of Light to keep the darkness back. And the Tower of Light is lit by, sort of righteous living. That's kind of the underlying theme. And at some point, then father goes off to help others, shore up their defenses as this darkness encroaches, and he disappears. And then mother goes to help them. And suddenly the people that are supposed to watch the kids don't show up. And so they're caught in this place where's my help coming from? And now they have to deal with this not so awesome adventure of life on the farm by themselves. Well, eventually they go to church for help because, it's the frontier. Where would you go for help if your kids and no one's showing up to help you? Well, they go to church and there are new people at church that they've never met before. And now there's kind of different forces at play, 2 different groups. And so this story is really a story of discernment. The kids kind of going back to what they've learned in the Bible, what they learned from their parents, to figure out who can we trust? And so the story is this kind of ongoing story of them being confronted by outsiders, people they don't know, who are telling them things that sound like the truth, but are they the truth?
That's powerful.
Does that sound anything like 2021, maybe?
That's
lots
so
of things
relevant.
that sound like the truth, but they're not. And so the kids kind of fall back on the scriptures sort of throughout to know what's true and what's right. And then, like any fantasy story, eventually there's an awesome battle, and amazing things happen, and it's cool. And I won't spoil it. But in the end of this story, they learn who their guardian is, who they can trust. And so now, if we go to the next story, on the next slide.
While we wait for this slide, I just want to say you had me at Little House on the Prairie. When if you're trying to use that style of or that setting, at least, you're definitely gonna have a lot of homeschoolers excited.
Yeah, well, but fantastic, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you're not into fantastic, then that's a different deal, right? But hey, that's how it goes. So, Still Small Voice, the second book, it takes a turn. Okay, and so in this story, they have a guardian. And they feel called, like their conscience has been pricked, and they need to go off to save their parents. They've got a way they might do that. They're going to go light another tower of light. That's awesome. They're ready to do that. But then their uncle shows up, and he's not having it. Their uncle's not necessarily a believer. He doesn't buy into everything that they're saying. And so now it's this conflict of their conscience versus this other adult in their life who has a different idea. And so a lot of this story is really how do you struggle with your conscience? How do you listen for that still small voice?
Right.
Eventually, as the story goes along, they end up at the evil circus, and this was super fun. I got a whole Instagram thing talking about why I did the circus the way I did it. And it's really fun. But the point is that they almost save mom and dad, but they don't realize it until it's too late. And so there's also, one thing I will say about these stories is there are hard truths in my stories. Like, it's not all roses and sunshine. Bad things happen. There are some scary parts. So you do need to be aware of that. But the point is, life is like that, right? Yeah. So if I'm going to have times, if I maybe violate my conscience, that there are consequences. And so these kids have some consequences in this story. There's also this guy that's kind of sneaking around on the back end, causing trouble for them, that makes the story pretty cool. But in the end, they get separated from their uncle. He kind of sees the light, and in his mind, he's saving the kids from danger and sends them off. And so this story kind of ends with them back with this guardian from the first story. So if you want to go to the next book, now they've come to the river, and all they've got to do is just cross the river and light the tower, and all will be fine, and they will save their parents, and it will be all good. And then they get attacked, and it's a horrible attack on the river, and the kids get lost from each other. They end up separated, lost, alone in a valley of darkness. And so now they've got to reach out to God for the courage to fear no evil. And so this whole story is one of each finding their courage in the Lord to get through their own personal struggle. And I think what's fun about this story to me personally as a writer is I really tried to take those things that especially if you grew up in the Midwest US, there are things that you know about or are worried about that you might not other places. So in the river, there are the giant carp that knock people out of boats. Like, that became a thing. I'd never seen that in a fantasy story, right? Like there's a lot of stuff in my fantasy stories. And what's been great about this all along is I've collaborated with my kids. So the three kids, Ethan, Aiden, and Lauren, from youngest to oldest, those are the kids in the story. And so they've all had their own editorial stuff. And like, there are these blind salamanders that cause a problem. That came from one of my sons. So that's been a really fun thing. But this story is a story of courage. And at the end, they managed to save their mother, but not their father. And that leads us up to the next story. And let me tell you, you guys, Armor of God, this is the world showing of this. Like, no one, I haven't published this out generally. Nobody's seen this cover.
Wow.
Because Armor of God is coming out in November. November 19th, it will be fully available.
Awesome.
And this is a story of faith. And their father has been turned to the darkness. He is now the champion of the darkness.
Wow.
And the children have to find the lost pieces of the armor of God before the bad guys do. Or bad stuff's going to happen. Now, I'm not going to go into any more detail about this story because it's not out yet. So it would be total Spoilerville for the people that have been reading all along.
Right.
But I will say, from the people that have read it, I've got a very small group of people that are my inner circle that are the light bearers. So this is a group of families from kids from ages like 7 through 16, basically. Different families, different kids, different ages, and they all point back. I just saw Sam Welch reply. She is a light bearer, so I'm really excited about that. That she loves the stories. And so one of the things to say about it is I work really hard to get that feedback, right? I've got one family that reads it to their whole as a family of kids, like from, I think they have 5 kids from like 6 to 14. And they tell me what they don't like, and I fix it. And so, but overall, this one, part of the faith in this one is really the children are now faced with these people that aren't of their faith at all, have no idea what's going on, and how do they share their faith. And so there's a really great part in here that I won't give away, but just to say that's the point is the characters in these stories all up are trying to live by good Christian morals, but they also recognize they can't do it. It's faith. Faith is the thing, right? Like at the end of the day, like it's our faith in Christ that redeems us, not our actions. Right. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't act rightly. And so that's kind of the underlying thing. And that's the difference, I would say, between this series and others was it was written very explicitly, intentionally with a Christian worldview, right, to highlight these things like conscience, faith, discernment, where other stories just aren't that intentional about it, and they may bring it out. I mean, there are great stories out there, but not necessarily done intentionally the way mine were written. Right.
Now, you said you had families that were reading it to, a wide range of children.
Yes.
What age is this really geared towards reading level wise?
So the feedback overall is that read by yourself is probably not like 9 an advanced reader at 9 or a 10-year-old. 10 to 13 is kind of the optimal. I'll go sit down and read it by myself. But it's designed, there's a lot of little whimsical things or things that the 5-year-old in your family can grab onto and enjoy, because my 5-year-old needed those things to grab onto and enjoy. Right. But they're not going to get some of the deeper parts. So, what I tried to do was, and the other thing is about middle grade is if you look at the general genre, the books that are targeted to girls and that have a lot of emotions, feelings, how do they interact with each other emotionally. The boy stuff has a lot of action and building and things like that. And so I've tried to do a nice weaving of those concepts. And so there'll be a few chapters of Lauren's point of view and what she's feeling. That's awesome. And then all of a sudden Aiden will build something fantastic, or Ethan will do something silly. And so there's just this mix as we go through, and that's what keeps it entertaining for the whole family.
That is so thoughtful. I love that, because it would be, okay, my daughter can pick out a read aloud book and then the boys get one after, and then we go back and forth, but this sounds like the whole family would love it. So I love that you were intentional about that.
Well, and I that's the feedback I get too. Like there are some kids that it wasn't for them just because, I had one boy, there's just too much feelings in this. I want more action. Right. And I get that. Sometimes that's not the right thing, but I would still say, girls and boys both like it. And that's the feedback from the light bearers is I've got some 13-year-old boys that love it, and they want, like, I gave them the advanced copy of this book on Saturday, like at noon. By Sunday at noon, they both have given me their feedback. So,
I love it. That's great. That's a good book right there. And it's good that you wrote a series, because you don't want to leave people hungry for more.
Well, and that's just it. From a series perspective, there are 2 more books in this family read aloud series. We have Wellspring of Life is the next book. God willing, it will be out in November of next year. And then Demolishing the Stronghold will be the last book in this series the following year. Again, God willing. But then I'm also collaborating with another author on something that's still a little secret, so I can't really divulge that yet. There is an inkling of something at the end of this book that when it comes to full release, I'll say more. But then I'm also working towards doing possibly a kind of more boy character focused early reader. and
Okay.
kind of a girl character focused early reader that's more, the kind of 25,000 word book, maybe a little more like some of those just, something you get in second or third grade.
Right.
That's a little thinner, quicker read. That's kind of the next thing we'll do, but it just takes time to put these out. Kind of releasing one a year is about what I'm able to do at the moment.
And I just love how this was birthed, how you were having your own spiritual experiences with your A.W. Tozer and C.S. Lewis books, and God was showing you all this, and you were wondering, how do I share this with my children? I mean, that's what Jesus did with parables. He spoke on their level, and I just love that you were able to do that and use your gift as a writer to present that to children. So it's exciting.
No, I just feel blessed that God gave me the ability to do what I've done. I mean, the net of it is that the other piece of this that I think is so important in that journey was the book Fear No Evil. I lost on an airplane. I had written it in a notebook, and I lost it on an airplane in like 2018.
Oh.
If I hadn't lost it, I would have released it in 2019. Yeah, that's right, in 2019. But because I lost it, everything got delayed. So I didn't release that book until 2020. And what year or time would have been a better time to release a book about children who are lost and alone in a valley of darkness, isolated, separated, than in 2020? That was that was the theme of 2020. So, God has his timing on these things.
He does, yes. He directs our paths for sure. We can make our plans, but he knows exactly the timing. We never would have dreamed 2020 would even be a thing. So he knew.
Right. Exactly.
So I would love to know, you just went through your awesome book series. I would love to know, do you have specific resources that can help homeschooling families?
We do. Could you put that next slide up, please?
Sure. We will get that up in just a moment.
Yeah. So basically right now we have the books. Light of Mine has actually, if you go get the current version of Light of Mine, it actually has reading comprehension questions just in the book. So you could do that, and there's a book with comprehension questions in it. And then we have actual curriculum that you can download from our website that goes with it. It's it's a 4-week unit study. I'm working towards having this for every book, but I got a little bit delayed because the other feedback I got is you need audio. Everybody's been asking for audiobooks. So I'm also announcing today something that hasn't been announced before, is that the Light of Mine on Audible, we missed the delivery date. I was supposed to be available today, I was going to say, but unfortunately some delays in that. So before Christmas, this will be out on Audible as well.
Wonderful.
And so I know that for my own homeschool readers, one of our challenges was, there are verbal learners, kinesthetic, that kind of learning style thing. So one of my sons, really, to be able to pick up books, what he would do is he would read the physical book with the audiobook playing. And that's how he could comprehend the book.
Wow.
And so I felt it was super important for us to invest in the audiobooks first before I added any more curriculum options, simply because I'd rather kids be able to go and really comprehend the stories and do that kind of work. Like, it didn't make sense to put out a bunch of comprehension questions and things like that without making sure every reader could consume it, right? Like, I didn't think it was, like, to a certain extent, for some kids it's just unfair if that's the way they learn, is to have it read to them. And I know that moms are busy and they can't always spend time reading to all of their kids when they have multiple kids. So the audiobooks. And the other thing is the voice artist is incredible. I got to be honest. When I heard the first chapter, it literally made me cry, because she did such a good job of getting my vision for what that story should be read like. So she's beautiful. Amazing. So that again, God willing, that'll be out by Christmas. I'm hoping. I don't control some of this stuff on the publication side.
But it's coming. So that's awesome. Oh, wow. Parents can use that in their homeschool, like you had mentioned. We can use it on the road when we're traveling. I just love that. This is so wonderful.
Well, you mentioned on the road. That's one of the things, one of the families, I have a review on Amazon. They went and they took 2 of the 3 books on vacation, ran through them so fast on vacation, the kids were mad and wanted to go home to get the 3rd book.
I love it.
So anyway, yes, this is coming soon to audio.
That is wonderful.
So we can go ahead and drop that and let's just talk because I know you have some other
Okay.
questions for me.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to know what you see as one of the biggest challenges in the area of reading that students face today.
Well, I mentioned that whole, just sort of learning style thing. I think that's huge.
Right.
And a lot of parents don't necessarily diagnose that one way or the other, just because not every parent is a speech pathologist. Like, we don't know these things. And so it's good to try different things. And like I said, I want to accommodate that because I've seen that firsthand. I think the other thing is, even sometimes the best thing you can do is hand your kid a doodle pad or, poppets or something while that's going on, because they are listening. They just can't sit still during that time. So I think that's probably, as I've talked to other homeschoolers and when I watch, like, I'm in a lot of forums, a lot of different homeschooling forums here and there. And when I see parents bring up stuff about reading, I'd say that the other side of it is just knowing what's good. Like, I was talking to a homeschool parent on Saturday. He's like, yeah, my daughter's just read through everything I can think of, the C.S. Lewis stuff and Little House on the Prairie and those kind of things. And now they want to read this, that, and the other. And I just don't feel good about it, And so part of the thing was when they said that, I was like, well, why don't you go look at my blog? Because I have a list of books out there in my blog that we put in our homeschool co-op. Like, I know a bunch of Christian authors. And I've read their books and I have their stuff. And so I'm working towards having really good reviews of everything. It just takes time. And then if I'm doing reviews, I'm not writing. So it's back and forth. But I just see that need, because the thing is, there are great stories out there. I mean, when my kids were growing up, there was Percy Jackson, there was Hunger Games, there were all of these things out there, but they weren't necessarily written from a Christian worldview. You end up with a lot of these sort of grimdark anti-hero things going on that aren't the value system we want to impart with our kids.
That's
so
true.
I think that in trying to read is finding those things that have the value system you care about.
Yeah, that's good.
While providing good literature, right? I mean, that's the tricky part from what are the challenges in reading today?
Yeah. I mean, because parents, they say, well, my child's reading. I'm really excited. At least they love reading. But then they're reading about other children killing children. And, you don't think about it because they get so engaged with, the different characters. Not with your books. I'm talking about the Hunger Games.
There's lots of evil goes on, right? I mean, in the world. So I totally get that. And it's challenging. It's like, how do we get to a point where, how do we get to that point in society even?
Right.
That those are the heroes that we put up. And it's tough, especially in the fantasy genre, because if you're talking about fantasy and science fiction, typically there are like kids either seriously harming or killing people. Like that's the genre, right? And so how do you wrestle with that as a Christian, or how do you have the kids wrestle with that? Right. When they do harm for righteous reasons, how do you wrestle with that? And so those are some of the questions that came up. I mean, I think for me personally, the other big thing that parents have challenges with is the parents in the stories, because there are very few stories that write about a competent, good dad. I mean, you're more likely to see a Homer Simpson type dad in a story, someone who's an incompetent fool. And that's not what you want in a story. You don't want mom to look like she's out of touch and wrong in so many ways, when mom isn't out of touch and wrong in so many ways. In fact, mom's pretty competent. And so that was actually probably the trickiest part about my fourth book, was mom comes back. Like they rescue her in book 3. And now I got to write a fourth book that includes mom in a way that doesn't take away the kids' agency, right? Because in the end, the kids need to have things. And so there's some struggle in there. And thank God for I am so blessed to have like the best editor in the world, because she's a mom. And I have some pre-readers that are moms, and they're like, they kind of beat me up. They're like, no, that is not how a mother would do this.
No, you need that advice. I mean,
yes, she sounds like a petulant teenager. Fix it. And so I did, right? I mean, it was a struggle to write that book, in the sense of, I didn't want mother to so much take over the story that the kids couldn't be heroic. And I found that balance. I mean, that's the feedback I've gotten.
That's good. I love that.
And so in both of these, one of my big things is how do you make sure, because the other side of this, it's unique about my stories, and some people don't like it. All of the adults are by their title. So it's mother, father, uncle, like nobody has a name.
Wow.
And some people think that's like, it bothers people, but I did that on purpose because I meant it to be a read aloud. So if you're the mother reading the story to your kids, I wanted the kids to kind of have a picture of their mom as the hero in this thing. Okay.
That's incredible. I love that.
That was part of what I was doing. Right. Well, and so you've got these other characters. You have Night Protector, you have Uncle, things like that.
Yeah.
So if you're a youth pastor reading this to your, youth group or something, I wanted to be able to have them be the Night Protector, right? To be seen that way, or the parson, or some of these authority figures.
Right.
Because it's kind of like, when you're a kid, it's kind of like Charlie Brown. All the adults kind of go wah 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 wah. They're just adults, and so it's literary as a literary thing. I'm probably in trouble breaking some important rule. But I really wanted, and what I found as the books progressed and some of those characters fell out, I also found the readers that identified with them. It was like, no, you can't take that character out. I want that character in there.
Wow.
So anyway, there's some different things, but yeah, parents struggle with that. Where's a book that the parents don't look like fools? Well, that's my books.
I love it. Well, that's what parents are looking for, especially in this day and age when we need fathers and mothers to rise up, with just everything going on. We need strong fathers and mothers. So it even will challenge children to want to be that when they grow up, right? So they can be a good father and mother. And I like that you use the title, because I think it also shows respect for the title.
Right. No, that's a big thing with me, just generally. Like, when I have worked with youth, I am Mr. Brokken on purpose. I am that figure, because that's who they need to see me as at that point in their life.
Right.
Because I tend to be in charge of things. Like, I'm now the Awana commander. These are things I do. So, but you mentioned strong fathers. Could you put up the next slide? Because this is super important to the message I want to get across today too.
I think she's working on that. Okay.
So the other thing I want to say is we have so many new homeschoolers out there, and we have all of these dads this year that are first-time homeschoolers. I have talked to so many of them, and like, they've got big questions, like, how do I help my wife? Or, how am I a better husband to my wife as she homeschools? We haven't done this before. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to act. I don't know what, I get home at the end of the day at work. What do I do? Maybe I've run out of words at the end of the day. So I give out these dad jokes of the day. Go ahead and build that out the rest of the way. Like, why did the construction worker pour peanut butter on the highway? To go with the traffic jam. So I put this stuff out I put out a dad joke every day. So if you go to Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the things, YouTube, you'll find me there. And I do that pretty intentionally, because dads, I've been on the road working hard with customers all day long. And I want to connect with my kids, but I've just run out of words. And so if you can grab the dad joke of the day, that's awesome. But at the same time, I've got some other stuff that's going on where I've been working with some various conferences to be able to speak. And so this is going to take some time to build that up. But I have kind of 3 different topics I've talked about so far. One of them is how to support your wife. And I got so much feedback on that one. I need to do a blog about it. Like, it'll probably be a multi-post blog thing, because it comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And just so you know, my wife Janet, we've been married 26 years. And she's a homeschool mom that runs a co-op. Like, we're kind of deep in the homeschooling here.
Right.
But then I got another one, just like, how do you start an enrichment activity, right? Because we got all of this new homeschoolers coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, in my area, there isn't a soccer club. There isn't a, whatever, robotics, whatever it is that your kids need. How do you get started if you've got to be the one that starts it? So I've got kind of a thing on that, which could be good for men or women, quite frankly, because I've run some clubs. I've started some things for homeschool. And then the third one is really helping that technical child. So, as I grew up, one of my challenges is I'm an engineer by trade. It's what I do. And it's kind of, you don't see too many stories, like sermons. I've never seen a sermon about mechanical engineering. Just haven't seen that in the church, right? But there's a lot of mechanical engineering in the Bible, actually, right? If you look at the temple, the ark, the things like that. And so I've got to talk how to help your technical child see themselves in God's word.
Wow. That is phenomenal. I want to see more of that.
Well, we could get back on again and talk about that by itself. It's its own thing. So anyway, just to say, I've got a lot of resources for dads. Go check it out. Either, I post the dad jokes all the time and various things on social media, but on my website, there's other resources like that.
Wonderful. Well, that's exciting. So before we sign off, do you have any advice that you would love that you could give any parents?
Yeah, actually, so the number one question or challenge I see come up that just parents struggle with is, I've got 2 or 3 different kids in my family, right? I've got multiple kids, and all of a sudden one of them hits 10 or 11 and they're like disrespectful. They don't do their chores. They're talking back. Now, some of that is the brain damage of puberty. Like, you can't get around it. Like, it's just going to happen. But some of it is just cognitive changes. When your kid hits that next level of mental development, sometimes they're asking you why, not to be disrespectful, not to push back, but they just want to understand. They want to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So while I'm not saying that you take disrespect, lightly, right? Like, if your kid's being actually disrespectful, but I found that getting my own kids through that phase, a lot of what had to happen when they said why was taking a step back and going, are you asking this because you don't understand? Or are you asking this because you just don't want to do it?
Right.
And that kind of puts them in a different position, because sometimes they don't understand. They're not pushing back on you because they're just at a new stage of development where you telling them what to do isn't enough anymore, because as a human, they've gotten to be a little bit smarter and more advanced. And so if you want to reduce the stress level with that tween, just asking that question can really lower the temperature in your house.
Wow, that's really good advice. Because I have noticed with that age, the parenting, it just shifts and is completely different. And it can be very frustrating. So that is really good advice.
Oh, thanks. Well, and so everybody, thank you so much for your time today. I really hope you found some interesting stuff here, and I'm looking forward to you trying out my books. I did want to say that this is a pre-sale. So if you were to get this set that's on the screen today, you will get it a couple weeks before it's available to the general public.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for watching today. Be sure to check out AlanBrockinAuthor.com and order these for your kids. And if you're looking for a good deal on the SchoolhouseTeachers.com curriculum, we have an incredible sale going on. If you go over there right now and use code HOME, you will be able to get 30% off and only pay $35 for a quarterly membership. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks.